What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming back with another box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw basically nothing come out, unless you want to count, of course, Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul as a brand new release that was, I believe, also day and date release as well. But we have a bunch of films coming back to theaters, including Spider-Man No Way Home, the more fun stuff version, so technically a different version of the film. However, it's still essentially the same movie from what I have gathered, and so therefore I'm going to count it as such. However, the fact that this film, even after coming out in December and having the largest box office of the last few years, it is still obviously a movie that people actually want to go and see, bringing the film's domestic total up to $810.7 million. However, there's apparently a fight going on between both Sony and Paramount with the number one spots of the box office for the weekend on the line, because Sony is claiming victory while Paramount is saying, hold your horses there. I think that we might actually have a little bit more money. And so we'll have to wait and see, of course, what the Monday numbers show. Again, this is a holiday weekend, and so the actuals themselves will be a little bit delayed. We'll probably get some numbers sometime on Tuesday or Wednesday to know exactly who officially won the weekend or not. But regardless of that, when you have Top Gun Maverick, which has been out for 15 weeks, this is now its 15th week of release, going up against Spider-Man No Way Home, which has been out on home video for several months at this point in time. It goes to show you that, one, there isn't a whole lot of stuff at the box office, and two, it's showing you, and its audience is telling you, Hollywood, what they want to actually go see. They want to go see things like Spider-Man No Way Home because it was a lot of fun. It was nostalgia done right. There were a lot of fun elements to it. They want to go see Top Gun Maverick because it is one of the most entertaining, fun times you'll have at the theater, especially this year. I would even say over the last several years, and it's just a darn good film to boot, with amazing visual effects, especially since many of them are completely practical, with people actually inside of those jets. They may not be flying them, but the fact that they're experiencing those actual G-forces is still impressive nonetheless. And this is something that's interesting because, as you can see, National Cinema Day was yesterday, and that's when a lot of theater chains across the country had all their tickets at $3, and that clearly helped out a lot. Apparently, it even made it where this Labor Day weekend has now already beaten, or is projected to beat, last year's Labor Day weekend, which is a very good sign for at least the box office health, though it's not nearly as high as it probably should be. It's again made more clear when you look at the kinds of films that are being released, and also just how little faith either the studios have in those releases or just how little work they put into them. The ones that seem to have a lot of work put into them, and the ones that seem to actually give people what they want, seem to be the ones that are actually doing the best. Looking at Spider-Man No Way Home, it's now up to $1.9 billion. That's right, $1.9 billion. Again, this makes sense to count it all together within the original release, because even though it is a film that has some changes to it, it is essentially the same movie, and so people are going to see Spider-Man No Way Home, and not necessarily just because they want to see all the new stuff that might be in the film, if that makes sense. So $1.9 billion, incredibly impressive. Again, the biggest grossing film of the last several years. And again, kudos to Sony, who is the domestic distributor of this film and got 75% of those raw profits. But let's also give some kudos to Top Gun Maverick, which continues to make money, adding another like $20 million or so just over the last week, now up to $1.429 billion. Theoretically, at this point, $1.5 billion is not outside of the realm of possibility, and so Top Gun Maverick is going to be up there for 2022 at least as being likely the number one film of the box office, both domestically and worldwide. We, of course, have several films like Black Adam, not until October, and Avatar, The Way of the Water, which theoretically could make a lot of money, could be big for the box office, but those films obviously have to be good and have to have good positive word of mouth, similar to Top Gun Maverick, if they're going to have any chance of actually doing that, which I have my own doubts about, because Black Adam looks okay, but then you looked at Avatar Shape of Water, and let's just be honest, the first Avatar film really wasn't all that good, and other than, hey, visual effects, doesn't have a lot of selling points to it. So I imagine that the box office for Avatar 2 is probably going to be a lot less than that for the first one, though I do still think that $1 billion is possible for that specific film. But Top Gun Maverick right now in a very good position, crossing $700 million domestically, insane, continuing to still make money, and could end up still being the number one box office film, going back to the number one spot this weekend if Spider-Man No Way Home's more fun stuff version, when the actuals come in, if that actually happens. We also had DC League of Super Pets coming out this past weekend, so let's go ahead and pull actually the full weekend charts, that way we can see. Again, Top Gun Maverick as the number 2 movie, going up 16%. That's, again, something insane. They added theaters, 151, and it actually increased its revenue in its 15th week of release. That just shows you how strong this film actually is, adding 16% from last week. DC League of Super Pets also saw a very good weekend, even though it lost theaters. It actually jumped 32%, so clearly it's actually going to be more of a family film. I would imagine that a lot of that probably came from Saturday's cheaper tickets, because if you have families and maybe you've been wanting to see this movie, but you really didn't really want to pay full price for it because it didn't look like it was worth it, you're like, hey, I can bring all my family and only pay $3 for each of their tickets. Seems like that is likely the scenario as to why this film did as well as it did this weekend. But hey, coming in the number 3 spot, very good sign for that movie. It still has a ways to go to make its money back, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. Another film that's actually stepping very much so in the right direction is Bullet Train, dropping to the number 4 spot, but only dropping 4%. And as I said, those are the kinds of drops that this film needs to have consistently, and since nothing big is coming out until really mid-October anyway, it's got a lot of room in order to run basically with this. It seems that right now, at the very least, it is moving in that right direction. It's cutting more so into how much it needs to make up to break even. And so it seems that breaking even is a lot more of a possibility for now for this movie. And then rounding off the top 5 of the week is The Invitation, making another $4.7 million in its second week of release, only dropping 31%. So again, that's just for the 3-day weekend. We, of course, will get more numbers as we start to get updates for what the actual Labor Day weekend numbers themselves will look like. Looking at the actual individual films, as I said, Spider-Man No Way Home's $1.9 billion, incredibly impressive. $1.4 billion for Top Gun Maverick, also impressive. DC League of Super Pets, $153.2 million. So again, it's slowly getting there, but it's not doing nearly as well as, for instance, Bullet Train is doing in those week-to-week drops. Bullet Train, as I mentioned, now up to $196.8 million, so almost at the $200+ million range, so getting ever closer to its break-even point, and I think that it likely will get there because it's just a darn good movie, and it's just so much fun. I'd recommend everyone go see it, especially because of all the references to Thomas the Train Engine, and if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about, and it's freaking hysterical. And then the last film in the top 5 was The Invitation, which is now up to $18.2 million. Now, a couple films that I did not mention that are on this list, but I do want to bring up today nonetheless. One, Jaws came back in theaters. That's right. Jaws came back, and as you saw on the chart here, it actually came in the number 10 spot. So even after being out for 40, 50 plus years at this point, the film still came in at the top 10 spots, coming out at 1,200 screens. That's a very good per theater ratio, but once again, also still a good commentary on the modern state of films. The other film that I didn't mention, Honk for Jesus, the only new film technically to come out this weekend, only made a whopping $1.7 million. And we don't have a budget yet for this movie, so I can't say whether or not it's going to be a flop or not. But this is also one where it is on Peacock day and date release. So seems like a movie that they put together probably not for all that much money, and they didn't really care about much money anyway. It'd probably be pulled from a lot of theaters by the course of the next 2 weeks, if I had to imagine. Either way, yeah, there was definitely no salvation for Honk for Jesus. There's a reference for you. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and do some box office projections because we have numbers for 2 films that we can do some projections on today. So The Invitation, making $18.2 million after the first 2 weeks, means that I'm projecting it to make somewhere between 26 and 36 by the end of its run. 3,000 Years of Longing, another film with Idris Elba, is up to $6 million, which means I'm projecting it to make somewhere between 8 and 12. It'll be an interesting film because right now there are no international numbers for the movie. It's a higher budget film than what people would have expected, costing around $60 million to produce. And so it means that this film not looking very good as far as profitability is concerned, but there are still some of those factors out there that could potentially help it out with, of course, a delayed release schedule in different countries, etc. But something tells me that if this is what it's doing domestically, I don't really see how it does much more internationally in comparison. Looking at the actual numbers for the break even and for the most likely loss and gain scenarios, Invitation, right now it's on pace to actually make its money back. Projected to make somewhere between $681,000 to $6.9 million. I suspect it'll be in the millions of profit, but really not all that much. Definitely not as much as they were probably wanting to. And I have to go back to this point. If they had waited until October to release this film, could they have actually made more money because of the atmosphere of October? It is a question I think that is well worth asking. Whereas 3,000 Years of Longing right now is because of the $60 million budget and add on top of that marketing costs, typical marketing costs and other things, right now is looking at losing somewhere between $84 and $82 million. So, hey, good job on promoting the film that you didn't really promote, especially with the amount of money you put into the actual production cost. Some might say, well, doesn't that mean that the marketing likely costs less? Maybe, but we don't have access to those numbers, and so we just have to go based on what the rule of thumb typically is, and based on that, even without that, it would still not be looking good for the movie, but especially with that, not looking good either. B still, again, looking to be a financial loss as well. Looking at some of the updated totals, again, Invitation, only about $4 million in the red, so that's why I think that it will make that up in the next course of the next 2 weeks. Not a very good chance for 3,000 Years of Longing. Beast, $25.6 million in the red, so Again, could it potentially make its money back? Maybe. It has to do a little bit better than what it's doing right now, but it's definitely still a possibility. Fall is right on the cusp of making its money back, and so that is, again, not likely going to, that likely will happen very, very soon. Bullet Train, which is now at 196.8, is only 16 million in the red. As you can see, it's getting into that 50% range, so it will likely, based on the numbers, if they continue to go in this direction, will have doubled its numbers based on the first 2 weeks. So it had a first slow 2 weeks, but if it doubles that number, that's a very good, strong sign of strong holds, and that could obviously indicate that it'll end up breaking even. And just some of the other numbers here, the film Nope. This is something that I mentioned earlier as well in my box office breakdowns before, that this film looked to be a flop. However, I pointed out that this film had a very delayed release internationally, where internationally it didn't perform crazy good, but a good enough to where it made up for a decent amount of its money. Right now, that international market is finally starting to come into play in a very real way. It's almost double the amount of money it made in the first 2 weeks, and right now only 6.3 million in the red. So I think that Nope might actually end up being a break-even profitable movie, even though domestically it's pretty much done. The international markets are where that film is starting to make up some of that ground. And then there are, of course, other films like Thor: Love and Thunder, which has made 74 million, and right now it only added about 2 million since last week. That includes both the weekday numbers and the weekend numbers, at least based off of what was being reported from thenumbers.com. If that is indeed the case, then you're looking at a movie that is pretty much dead in the water, and also raises the question of, yeah, you've made a film that's profitable, but man, oh man, in comparison to some of the other MCU films, just not looking all that good versus Minions: Rise of Gru, which, to be fair, Universal did some dealings with China, and so a lot of money coming from China there. So, patooey, I spit at you, Universal, and some other films like The Black Phone, etc. And also, Jurassic World Dominion, still not at $1 billion, though at this point, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. I definitely think that it's going to hit $1 billion at this point in time. So, hey, for those that were calling that out 3 weeks ago, hey, good job. It took you about a month to get there, but hey, Universal's going to squeeze out every single cent it can just to say it has $1 billion film. The film still sucks, and there's not much you can do to change that. But anyway, what are your thoughts about this? Are you excited that Top Gun Maverick is still at the top? Now over $600+ million in net gain profits. Crazy stuff there. Crazy good box office. Also, did you maybe see Honk for Jesus to Save Your Soul, The Invitation, or any of the other films that we talked about? Or have you seen Bullet Train yet? Have you been on the fence? I recommend going to see it. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, slap that fire button on Odyssey. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.